I'm here.
I remember a teacher that I had. Now, I went through the 7th grade. I went to the 7th grade. I left home when I was 10 years old because I was hungry. And I used to, this is true. I work in the summer and I go to school in the winter. But I had this one teacher. He was the principal of the Harrison School in Vincennes, Indiana. To me, this was the greatest teacher, a real sage of my time, anyhow. He had such wisdom. And we were all reciting the Pledge of Allegiance one day. And he walked over, this little old teacher. Mr. Laswell was his name. Mr. Laswell. He says, he says, I've been listening to you boys and girls recite the Pledge of Allegiance all semester. And it seems as though it's becoming monotonous to you. If I may I recite it and try to explain to you the meaning of each word. I, me, an individual, a committee of one, pledge, dedicate all of my worldly goods to give without self-pity. Allegiance, my love and my devotion to the flag, our standard, Old Glory, a symbol of freedom. Wherever she waves, there's respect, because your loyalty has given her a dignity that shouts freedom is everybody's job. United. That means that we have all come together. States, individual communities that have united into 48 great states. 48 individual communities with pride and dignity and purpose. All divided with imaginary boundaries, yet united to a common purpose. And that's love for country. And to the republic, a state in which sovereign power is invested in representatives chosen by the people to govern. And government is the people. And it's from the people to the leaders, not from the leaders to the people, for which it stands. One nation, meaning so blessed by God, indivisible, incapable of being divided, with liberty, which is freedom, the right of power to live one's own life without threats, fear, or some sort of retaliation. And justice, the principle or qualities of dealing fairly with others. For all, which means, boys and girls, it's as much your country as it is mine. And now, boys and girls, let me hear you recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Since I was a small boy, 2 states have been added to our country, and 2 words have been added to the Pledge of Allegiance: under God. Wouldn't it be a pity if someone said that is a prayer and that would be eliminated from schools too?
Well, thank you for joining us on the 28th of January 2018. This is Education by Ed. And so, Ed, take it away.
Thank you. We'd like to thank Red Skelton for his point of view. The one thing that he did mention is that 2 states were added. Prior to that, the 48 states are a constitution. The 2 states that were added are corporation administrative rules. So it's comprehending what the lawful and legal structure of this country is truly about. And knowing when you're putting your instruments in, how to put your instruments in effect. How to put your instruments in to the court so it does have effect. And it is putting these instruments in. And the one thing is, I don't support motions because motions are like a ship. So you want to do an affidavit, have it at least notarized, probably certified, and preferably if you get it certified by the court, that makes it even a lot better. But these are things that life is a learning experience, and it depends on how you want to learn it. And a lot of people go through a lot of rough roads. And it's very disturbing that we go through these things because we're not properly taught. And the one thing is to know what the flag is. Now, we have a peacetime flag, and that's the real flag that's supposed to be presented when you go to court. It's always good to probably buy one of those little peacetime flags and go to court with it. So that way they know what your standing is. You know, you want to say when you get in there, you're there at special appearance. You don't want to get in argument with the terrorist in there called administrative judge. Because remember, he's administrative judge to the corporation. And this is where a lot of people get confused or they don't comprehend how our court system really works compared to what we think it does. And that is the saddest part because people think without knowing. We all do it. We all been there. I've been there more than once myself. And it's very disturbing that we don't pay attention to the circumstances of the incidents that we cause ourselves. So when he's talking about the new states that were added, they were added in a corporation, and that's one thing you got to realize, that your Washington, D.C. Congress is under the British Vatican rules. They are not Americans. They are foreign agents. This is a reality that you have to comprehend. So when you go to these courtrooms, that you have to know who, what, why, and what you're speaking of. And it's very frustrating because I know it takes a long time sometimes for some to learn this. Some can pick it up pretty easy. The one movie I do recommend is Interstate 60. It's on YouTube. I do recommend people watch that at least twice, minimum twice. And it's very disturbing because people don't get it. It's like California right now. To me, it's disturbing what's going on in California because in California, they just passed administrative rules. If a waitress gives a straw out, just a straw out to a customer that doesn't ask for a straw, the waitress could do 6 months in jail. This is how crazy it's gotten because, oh my God, the plastic. Well, it's a parent's responsibility. It's the senators and congressmen's responsibility because they failed to teach their children and they failed to bring that out to the general public. But the reason why they don't do that is because it's financial income. These men and women don't love you. They don't care about you. They don't want to have nothing to do with you. All they want is money in their pocket. The root of all evil is money, not the love. The root of all evil is money. That is the one thing that Charles Heston said in one of his major interviews. The reason why he accepted the role in Moses was because he wanted to bring that truth out, and they wanted him to change the verse to the love of money, and that's when he was going to resign from the role because he wasn't going to do it for the love of money. He's going to go by the strict book that he was brought up on. So they allowed him to do that, and then after he died is when they added it in the new movie. And if you have a copy of the old one, save it and play it to the new one. It is very interesting, a lot of the stuff that was in the original movie of Moses compared to the new edition Moses that they edited and added certain other things into it. And that's where you have to pay attention, to these circumstances of what goes on. It's like the statute codes and administrative rules. They change it from the Constitution or this state versus the state. And the very important thing is comprehending how these words and what they mean when you go to court. You have to comprehend these things of the circumstances when you go to court. See, the court is not there for you. These men and women don't work for you. They're not your friends. They're not your pals or anything like that. As soon as you can accept the truth of that fact, you're ahead of the game. But until you accept the truth of that fact, you're still behind in the game. And to them, it's a game when you go into court because, like a judge will tell you, it's not his responsibility to tell you what the law is. It's your responsibility to know the law. And, it's really disturbing when a judge does that because it affects the children and it affects the adults around him. Like I said, these men and women don't care. And as soon as you comprehend that these men and women do not care, you're ahead of the game. And as soon as you start accepting it, because, see, everybody goes, well, I'm going to take the Bible in, and no offense to those who believe in that book. I can't get more and more knowledge, but the one thing is the book has a lot of interesting history in it that is being converted to others to learn. But the main part of that section of the book is everybody says, well, we got to relive history because it says it in the Bible. No, we don't have to relive history, folks. We are the ones that are alive today. We're the ones that could change the history. We're the ones that can make the history better. We're the ones to make sure that the children don't live through the living hell that we are living right now today. Because today, pretty much, it's no different today than it was in Nazi Germany. Everybody's paranoid what their neighbors are going to do. It's really disturbing when you have a classroom of kids and a kid farts in a classroom and the kid could be arrested for offensive odor. That's another disturbing fact. I mean, it just amazes me what goes on in our public schools. I do agree with homeschooling kids a lot more than I do in public schools. And everybody knows that when the government shuts down that they have to reset the tallies. They reclose all over the bank accounts, reshift the money around, and restart it. But Chuck Schumer, you could even put this on, Chuck Schumer, Senator Chuck Schumer, Congressman Chuck Schumer, stated that because of the Immigration Act, that's why the Democrats wouldn't pass anything. Because they want open borders. They want these terrorists to come in your home and rape your women, kill your children, and destroy your homes. They have no respect because the main point of that one is very clear. Very clear. And it's so clear because it brings income into their corporation. DHS, the corporation police departments. Remember, police departments or corporations, they are not there to work for you. They are not there for you. That's the one thing. And if you know anybody who gets into an ambulance and a man or a woman dies in an ambulance, by administrative rules, they cannot give you that information. That's the horrifying part right there. They don't give you the information of a relative that passed in an ambulance because they can't do it because they have to protect the ambulance driver and the corporation first. They don't care about you. That's why I suggest when you do your instruments at the hospitals and stuff, you make sure you do your rights, all reserve. You learn what a contract law is. You learn how to write the contract yourself. You have to do these things, folks, and the most important thing, you have to educate your children to do it. Because the school systems are there just for babysitting. They're not there to educate your kids because they lie to your kids about real history and real facts. They bring in the police department, fire department in and waste education time going, oh, we need to educate the kids on how to control themselves with the system. And we are living this a fact today. And it's so disturbing that we live that fact, and that's where Red Skelton brings in the structure of our history with the 48 states. 48 states is lawful, not legal. But you have to put the state and capitalize the state and capitalize the first word of that state, of this state. And when you use the state of, instead of like Oregon State, California State, when you use California, the state of California, doesn't matter how you write it, you are complying with corporation administrative rules. That's just a fact. But these are things of what comes up and what's being learned, what's being taught, and knowing how to defend yourself when you go into these courts. Because these, like I said, these courts, these men and women of these courts do not care for you whatsoever. They care about their paycheck. And the one thing is that judges and attorneys and prosecutors, they are liable. The only immunity that they have if they didn't offend and break the constitutional oath to you when you notice it. And if you don't stand up and speak up, because that's why when you're in court, every time a judge speaks or a public pretender speaks, you always got to object to it. Mandatory object to it. And when a judge says, you're out of order, no, judge, you're out of order. Isn't this fraud upon the court? And it's like bringing this information and type in fraud upon the court, learn what fraud upon the court is. So when he does this stuff, you know how to tell him what's going on in his court. He doesn't want it on record. Most of the times they're just going to tell you to leave. So it's better to leave than get in an argument. Those are simple things that can happen, simple solutions. And that's where people do not comprehend how simple life can be by doing this stuff and using the information that is provided by we the people. Because, see, we the people are the government. As soon as you accept that we have elected and public servants, we are the government by our Constitution. And you get all these people out there on the internet will tell you the 14th Amendment controls you. The 14th Amendment doesn't give you rights. Well, I have the structure on the 14th Amendment, and it separates lawful and illegal, and that was done by the Supreme Court in 1884. And these are things that you need to read these court cases and read this stuff so that way you comprehend what's going on around you. You can't rely on an attorney, and that's the one thing that, I mean, I see the Bundys got a wrongful lawsuit filed, but I don't see the Finnegans and the Bundys and the Hammonds filing criminal charges. They're probably told, don't do that because, we're your attorneys and you listen to your attorneys. Don't do that. And they don't do that. They let a few handful of court cases slip through. When it comes down to it, they slip them through. But when it really comes down to it, they don't let so many court cases go through because that way it makes it so that way we don't have it where we're winning and we have our rights intact. And that's what I'm saying is how to write your instrument. You have to put it intact the way you write your instrument. If you don't know how to write your instrument, you need to start typing in on the internet and looking at some of those things that are on the internet. Type in 4 or 5 different pieces of opinions. I know opinions are like diapers, but you're supposed to be responsible elders or adults or young men and women to comprehend these things. It's your structure to do it. It's your liability to do it. And if you don't sit there and do this, you're failing yourself. You're failing your own children. And you have to look on these things of how you're failing your children. Because you can't sit there and point the finger at the school district and say, well, the teachers failed me. You can't point your finger at somebody else and say, they failed my kid. How are they failing your kid when it's your responsibility? It's your liability. See, this is the one point that people have got to start being responsible. And that is the one thing that until you start defending yourself, you can't expect anybody else to help you out. Because before, people say, well, I pray to God, God's going to do this for me. Well, all right, well, if God or the Great Spirit or somebody gives you some knowledge, learn it. So you're asking for questions, and if you get some answers, then start focusing on it. Turn off your TV. Turn off your video games. This is the one thing that you have to pay attention to these things. It's not something that you could just go 10 minutes here, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. It's something that you have to literally spend time with to comprehend it. It's the things that you have to spend time with and learn it. And it's your responsibility to learn it. And if you don't learn it, you can't blame somebody else. Because if you want to start blaming and pointing a finger at you, it's like when you point one finger, you got 3 pointing back at you. So these are things that, to put things in perspective on how to do this. And knowing what your rights are compared to privileges. If you're 5 or more generations, you have constitutional rights, not privileges. If you're an immigrant, a citizen, a national, elected and public servant, registered church member, registered voter, you have privileges. Oh, don't forget, all immigration have privileges. And all immigration, until their 5 generations, can be shipped out any time in this country by the Constitution and by USA Immigration Act. That's why I encourage people to read the Immigration Act so that way you know what the Immigration Act truly says. You have to know these things. And we have it on new.org and trackers. We provide as much as we can going through this knowledge and education to bring it to you. But you have to sit there and educate your children. You have to bring it to the forefront. And knowing how to put your instruments together is like bringing the one thing is like we're still shocked that the Bundys haven't comprehended, or the Hammonds haven't figured this out yet. But everybody wants to go to an attorney because they're children. They're not responsible. When you go to an attorney, that means you're not responsible. When you go to an attorney in front of a judge, it clearly states you're not a responsible man or woman. That's what it means when you go in front of a judge with an attorney. You have a representative for you. So in other words, you cannot represent yourself. And that's really what it means. You have a representative for you that speaks for you, and you can't speak for yourself. That means you're a child. That's what it means when it comes down to it. And I plan on getting into religion here in a second. That's the main topic tonight with Kim Davis and her speech going, I'm a Christian, and I'm going to get into that. And I know people get on at me on that one for going on that one. But I have to bring up some points with that. It is very disturbing because, to me, when you do these type of mistakes, people go become a Christian. Some people, not all. Just depends on the way you are, the way you're brought up, your faith, your belief, your First Amendment rights, not privileges. And that is, your religion is a right so long as it's not pushed on everybody else like they're trying to do with Sharia law. Destroying this country like they're destroying England right now. They got 5 Muslim mayors, and the Queen of England is finally speaking out against Muslims in her own country, finally. But she should have done that sooner, never let them in the office and stuff. Anyhow, hiring an attorney waives constitutional protections, makes humans ward of the court with unsound mind. Exactly what it means. So you have a representative. So you're saying that you're not responsible for your actions. So, and this goes into Legal Encyclopedia, Volume 7, Section 4. You can look this up. We have it on the internet too, with the whole structure of it. And the relationship between an attorney and his or her client. Excuse me. Remember, you become a client. You become a servant of that attorney when you give your rights over. You have no rights at that point. The attorney could even put you in jail. That's why attorneys keep people in jail, so that way they don't lose out for you running out on them, and in that way they still make money while you're in jail. Because most attorneys and judges, the jails are private corporations, so most attorneys and judges get a profit from the corporation. Remember, attorneys and judges are corporation members. They are barred cards to the Bar Association. There is no such thing technically as a license. When you go to court, always put it in writing, get it notarized, hopefully certified. File it in court that you want to see the judge and the attorney's license. When you go to court, you want to see their license. You want to see their proof that gives them the right to practice law. And you'll find out they only have a bar card that only gives them a right. The word court, infant, a person, unsound mind, placed in the court under the care of a guardian. Davis Committee versus Lonnie, 290 Kentucky, 644-162 SW 2nd 189190. There must be a guardian jealousy, and that goes to Montgomery versus Erie, our company, CCANJ 975-2D289292, and see guardianship. So you can type in on your web browser, type in see guardianship, and you get to know what a guardianship is. So that even goes to children and adults. And this is the one thing that people have got to comprehend this stuff. Everybody goes, well, I want to take it to the world court. Well, if you take it to international world court, that's not part of the United States of 48 countries. You're taking it into the UCC codes now under the British realm of government. So it's knowing what department you're going into, what court you are doing, how you are going into the structure. To become a world citizen of the world government, a world citizen, we voluntarily follow, I'm going to give you this, folks, Title 8 USC 1481, loss of nationality by native-born or naturalized citizen. Of course, naturalized citizen, that's a conflict of interest because under the 14th Amendment and by the Supreme Court states that you have to be born on this soil to be lawful. So, I mean, attorneys write this stuff up to confuse you and confuse us, so that way they keep in business. They do this so that way they have their control over us. It's like preachers and teachers and stuff like this who don't tell the truth, who don't preach the truth, and that's what they do. They cover this up so that way they can keep the corporation courts going, and the burden of proof is on you. So when you go to these courts, you have to have the burden of proof in your hand. You can't go to court and speak. I suggest to a lot of people when you go to court, don't speak. You turn in your affidavits. Let your paper speak for you. The pen is mightier than a sword. So when you speak, now you just have the sword in your hand, and so you can be cut down real quick. But if you do your paperwork right, you can't be cut down. So these are the points of facts of learning this stuff as I've learned and those around us, and that's why we're bringing this knowledge to you in education. And that's the one thing you need to start looking at, these points of how severe these things are. Because they are very severe when you go to court. These things are not just a small-time point. You know, it's like California issuing a deal right now that if you serve a straw to somebody in a restaurant, you go to jail. I mean, how ludicrous is that? California is passing administrative laws. If you say the wrong quotation, transgender word, you go to jail. Excuse me, freedom of speech? You're telling me I don't have the freedom of speech? Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me, so we're supposed to be adults, but in other words, we're not supposed to have rights? That's exactly what they're doing. This is what Adolf Hitler did. No different. This is what the British government has done. This is what the Roman Catholic Christianity structure goes back to the Christian Crusades did. There is no difference. That's where you have to wake up and comprehend the reality that you're living right now today. There is no difference from the 13th century today in the way we're technically living. The only thing we have modern technology, lights and phones and all this stuff. Cell phones to rot our brains out, that short our electronics in our head. They do that. And people don't sit there and look at this stuff and pay attention to how it works. That's why the one thing I do suggest to people, too, is that when you're filing a complaint or you're filing an affidavit, always put in and do your research on 1938 Foreign Agent Registration Act. Include it. Ask them if they're registered. You want to see a copy that they're proven, certified copy, that they are registered under the 1938 Foreign Registration Act. And if they're not, that's a federal felony. Mandatory. Mandatory. They're not registered. It's a felony. End of story. Done deal. It says it right in the administrative rules of it. So use their words against them. That's what I say. You know, we the lawful bloodline Americans. You know, they wrote it. We the lawful bloodline Americans quote the original Constitution. They wrote it, so we have to go by what they wrote. I don't have a problem using what they wrote against them. And this is the point that there's a lot of people on the internet and Facebook that come out with this wildest stuff. Oh, we need to get rid of birth certificates. No. We need to know who's lawful and legal in this country. We don't want open borders. I mean, I live in a county in Oregon where, there's so many young 13 to 16-year-olds raped by Mexicans in my community where I don't have a problem. I think the father has the right to shoot the guy. I'm not advocating that type of violence. But a man's supposed to have a right to protect his family, and then when you sit there and telling him that he doesn't have a right to protect his family, and that his child is supposed to go to church and ask for forgiveness The hell is she asking forgiveness for? Then there's people out there say that she wanted it, she deserved it the way she dressed and stuff. Come on, folks. I mean, are we that ludicrous that we're not living in real reality? That is the whole point here. Are we living in reality, or are we living in this fantasy world? And I do tell people, and I do suggest people, type up Satan is God. You'll be amazed when it comes up in Bible verses too. It's like stepping out of the movie, watching production, and taking it all into your thoughts. And then you have to decipher what's right and wrong. That is your point of view that you have to decipher what's right and wrong. It's not anybody else's. You can always sit down and discuss these things with another man, woman, or with kids or teenagers around you and listen to everybody's point of view and come up with a structure, but it still stands the same. There is no changing in this stuff of life. Circumstances of life have been going on for thousands of years. It hasn't changed. Times have changed, but the basic circumstances and incidents of life have not. They're the same. That's where it sort of stuns me when people go off on these tangents that they go off on. We don't want the British government in our country. And that's where you folks have got to realize. We fought the British government 5 times, including World War II. We fought them. World War I was fighting the British government again. You got to realize that fact. Here's another good one. California is legalizing magic mushrooms because they say magic mushrooms help your brain, makes you smarter. Well, I always grew up with those people around me that used to take magic mushrooms, and I used to see how stupid they became. So I just have a problem with that one, with magic mushrooms, saying it increases your brain power and that stuff. I mean, I grew up around quite a few young adults, and I watched what happened to them when they took them. I was fortunate I never got into those things. I was glad. Everybody tried to get me, oh, Ed, you got to try this. I wouldn't do it. Something told me not to do it. So I have to go with my inner feelings. It's like when you go to court, when you start speaking. If something tells you not to say that, don't say it. Make sure you let the judge read your paperwork, and then you go through your paperwork, go, well, you know, sir, try not to use your honor, just say, sir. That's somewhat respectful. On page so-and-so, number so-and-so line, does it say this or that? Make him read your paperwork and record. Now, California is trying to say you cannot record in their courthouses and stuff anymore. That's federally illegal. Either they're public courthouses or they're not. And that's why when you go to court or you're filing your instrument, you want to make sure you write in that instrument that you're going to audio and videotape this for a record. You want to create the record. So you're writing in your instrument for a record. So what are they going to do? Then they're going to tell you, oh, well, we're going to do this and we don't have record. That's when you have to go to Title 17 and do your research right upon the court and have to know that before you go into that courtroom. These are things that it takes these comprehensive points of view to bring these things out, not only to yourself, but those around you. It's like, I want to get into one of the main things dealing with the gay and lesbian issues. I remember this at the Oregon State Capitol when they were trying to pass gay laws back in 2000 and 2003 and 5, 7. To me, it was always interesting, but it was like, and they're trying to say, well, you need to have a marriage license, and that's where this Kim Davis, who's been married apparently 4 times, now all of a sudden becomes a Christian. Which I have a real problem with that, because now she's saying, I'm a Christian, I've been married 4 times, I don't have to make amends to the men that whatever I did to them. So people go, well, I'm a Christian, so I don't have to make amends. Now I got found whatever they think they found. So they don't have to make amends. That's the saddest part of all this part of life. They cause harm, and, it's like Kim, she's saying, well, I can't accept these paperwork because my religious belief. Well, Kim Davis, you're not entitled to your religious belief on the clock, period, end of story. You work for the people. And if you don't like that, your job is terminated. And I really do hope they find this lady Kim Davis in contempt of court. I really do hope that she goes to jail for what she did. Because, I mean, I don't support gay and lesbian. I mean, they have a constitutional right if that's what they like. I do not support it. I don't agree with those type of circumstances. I'm not in favor of those things whatsoever. But the Constitution gives men and women equal rights. It's like the women have a right to the abortion, where I argue with people on the internet and different other phone conversations. And it's like, well, and I say this to the woman, well, you have a right to your body. Oh, yeah, it's my body. Nobody can tell me what to do. And I said, oh, yes, I can, because once you get pregnant, you're not entitled to that child. I can tell you where to have an abortion. I can tell you to do anything you want to do that child. Oh, no, you can't. Well, you're telling me one thing compared to another. Either you own your body and you have a right, or you don't. I always have an interesting time when they tell me, well, it's God's child. Well, okay, if it's God's child, then where is God? How come he's not going to be by your side taking care of that child? How come he's not providing food and shelter for that child? You know, because a lot of women today that are single mothers, no offense to them. My mother was single growing up. I didn't have a dad around. And, you know, I didn't think nothing of it growing up. It never affected me when it really came down to me. I didn't lose anything in life that I thought. I'm not going to be, you know, by democracy taught to feel guilty because I didn't have a father in my life. My father chose he didn't want to be in my life. He made his decisions. You know, I was a young kid, young man, and I figured that one out going, okay, well, he didn't want to be part of my life. That was his decision. So I don't have to live with his guilt. He has to live with his own stuff. That's the way life really works, folks. Especially when people say, well, they need to be forced into the child's life. No, they do not. If the man or even woman don't want to be part of their child's life, that's their decision. Oh, no, wait a minute. Yeah, that's their decision, not a choice. Because if they make a choice like that, that's being irresponsible. A decision means you have to be responsible. And it's a sad thing that people don't comprehend that fact of life. Most people don't want to be responsible for their actions. Most people don't want to be responsible for their children. And yes, we do comprehend that, you know, with today's economy and the way we're enslaved in servitude to the corporations, that parents don't have a lot of time with their kids working 2 or 3 jobs trying to keep a roof over their own heads. But that's the point where you need to start figuring out how to research and start doing 192, which we're doing. We're putting this together eventually. We're slowly figuring this stuff out on the system of how it works. And that's the point of walking not only myself through it, but walking you guys through it. But you have to be responsible in these things. You have to know what you're doing. Nobody else is going to be responsible for your actions. If you're not responsible for your actions, why do you expect somebody to take liability for you? Most people are not going to take liability for you. That's the saddest part about life, don't you think? But everybody goes, well, I need somebody to be responsible for me because I don't want to be responsible for my own actions. And it's sad. There are people who actually think that way. You know, I've been watching some of these little court TV deals, you know, on TV, on YouTube, but, you know, TV has these court deals, and I won't get into these characters, because these acting judges, what really disturbs me about it, they're going in front of a gold fringe flag, and a state gold fringe flag to boot that, so that proves it's corporation. So you're going in front of a man or a woman that's making a judgment instead of lawfully in front of a grand jury. All cases are supposed to lawfully go in front of a grand jury. That's why I really hope that this, with Kim that makes a plea bargain, and if it goes in front of a grand jury, that's going to be interesting in her community. I posted this stuff all around their Facebook walls and emailed it to different the city and county corporations over in Kentucky in her area, and it's trying to get them to comprehend their position of oath of office. Maybe we should ship them a whole bunch of mushrooms, I guess. California could do that, seeing that they're going through that one. I still can't believe they're legalizing, you know. But remember, legalese is, what is that called? British Government Administrative Rules. I mean, you can take all the mushrooms you want, so long as that you're responsible and liable, and so you're not causing harm to somebody else or injury, possibly body, personal or body injury to somebody's property damage. That's the one thing that people's got to start comprehending. When you do property damage, just own up to it. Go make sure it's covered. I mean, that's like with the gay and lesbians. You know, they have to be responsible to each other. And like I suggest to several I've talked over on the phone here lately, and I tell them, and I've brought up points to them, write a contract. Don't do a marriage license. Write a contract, because under Article 1, Section 10, you guys don't honor your contract, you take it to court. The judge has to go by the contract, not a marriage license. Because a contract, he has to go by that contract so the state don't get their cut. See, you got to be smarter than the bear when you go bear hunting. So when you do their marriage license, they can decide on what rights that you have. They can decide how to split your assets up. They can decide if you, I can't fathom that thought, but children and that type of circumstances, because that is confusing for children. I have witnessed that personally myself, how confusing it is for children, being raised by gay parents. Remember, I grew up in San Francisco Bay Area, and I watched it since 1970, even up here in the Oregon Territory, and around me I've watched it, and some parents, you know, are okay, and some parents, the kids are out there because they don't know what to deal with. And it is true. But a man or a woman has to be responsible and liable. Doesn't matter if you're gay or not. Like I said, I do not endorse, I do not support gayism. That is their right under the Constitution. The Constitution gives them rights so long as they're lawful bloodline Americans. If they're immigrants, hey, sorry to say, but you have to go by administrative rules. That's just life. So if you're smart, you're not on the street corner yelling out whatever you yell with some of these people yelling on street corners. You just don't do that. To me, that should be embarrassing enough to a man and a woman that is actually doing that on the street corner. Because why are you sitting out there yelling and screaming what you are instead of living life of what you are? You don't need to go out and flaunt it in people's faces and have people come after you, and then you want to blame everybody else because somebody else did this? You can't blame somebody else. I mean, and people go, well, they called me a name. They didn't like who I am or whatever. Well, sorry, grow some scales on your skin. Get a little toughened up. I mean, we grew up that way in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. Well, of course, I wasn't around until really the 70s where I comprehended things. In the 80s and 90s. But those who are older than me sure knew it. You didn't put up with that. Especially in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Everybody knew who was gay. You could tell by their attitude. Did they go out and deliberately beat them up? No. That's in movies. Most of that stuff's in movies. Most of the assaults on gay people today have been influenced by movies and radio shows and TVs. That's how they make their income. As soon as you start accepting the fact of how these men and women make a living on doing this, is like psychiatrists, is reverse psychiatry. They make a living on this stuff. That's their employment structure. They don't care about you, you know, so long as I can make a buck. I mean, I've been through where I was forced into an issue like that for defending my mother when I was 14 years old. You know, they said, well, I don't know what the hell he's here for. He knows exactly what he was doing. Yeah, you assaulted my mother, I was going to kill you. It was that simple. But, I mean, these are things that in life that we go through that we have to be responsible. I knew what my responsibility was at the time when I reacted the way I did. I honestly did. But most people, I guess, do not grow up that fast. I was blessed because I did grow up in a lot of ways. Faster than most. I paid attention. I didn't sit there and go play in video games like kids do today and lose their mind. That's not living in reality. Most kids today don't live in reality. Most even adults under 40 don't live in reality. They've had video games, shock TV, all this stuff that they live through. And that's the saddest part of it, because they're going through stuff that they don't know what the past is. That is the saddest part, that people don't know what their past is. Most people don't even know what their bloodline and heritage is in this country or the country they came from, because parents don't talk to them. They don't bring up the structure of their past. And there's some that have been very fortunate who know their family history. And for those men and women who do know their family history, that's a blessing. A lot of kids don't know it, especially when you get the state that kidnaps and steals children for profit and put them in foster care. That's the thing that gets to me. How many kids in foster care? Because the state makes money off Title IV. A caseworker, when a child's adopted out, caseworker gets $7,500, and $125,000 goes into the judge's retirement plans. And that was compliments of Bill and Hillary Clinton, the Title IV Act of, I think it was 1993. So these things are like this. It is reality. We are living these horrifying days. I mean, we are living in horrifying days when people say, well, if you see something, report something. A guy was assaulted here not too long ago. I'm watching his news story. Because a lady reported that this guy, she thought he was suspicious in the neighborhood in the playground. So the cops tackled this guy and beat the living daylights out of him because he was in a playground. He was doing nothing wrong. And then it turned out, not only that, he was a counselor for children. Report something, say something. How come people don't sit there when something's really going on and defend a child? That's what disturbs me. When they really see something, they don't get involved. And look at the definition of police departments. They are nonprofit corporations. They have a private contract with the city, county, and state. They are not there to protect you. You can type in Supreme Court. Police are not there to protect you. That is in the Supreme Court decisions. Supreme Court has clearly stated there's a well-known court case where 2 women were raped, called the police. The police took them a half hour to get there when they were only a few blocks away. And the women were raped, and they went and sued, and the Supreme Court says it's not their liability. I thought that was sad when you think about it, and people think that we have peace officers. Once we have peace officers, it depends if you have a peace officer in your community or not. Comprehend what a peace officer is compared to police. Police are no different than Nazism of the Adolf Hitler police departments. They're the same. There's no difference in this stuff, folks. Absolutely no difference. And that's the point, like with your states. When you go in the court system, you have to know if you're an admiralty. You have to know what court system you're into. That's the point. I'm going to see if I can find this here real quick. But I think this will be a good one for people to comprehend. I'm going to try to find the structure here in a minute that I should have probably thought about and pulled up. But I'm going to read off the structure of the flag, crowns to you on the flag. So this way you know what is on the flag when you go to court. The emblems, what it means, what jurisdiction. So give me a minute, I'll come back to that in a minute. But this is the fact that we're living through, that the children are being human trafficking. Oh, by the way, good news, but I'm still going to suggest that people mandatory do this. Apparently, acting president, corporation president Donald Trump is putting a bill in, or administrative bills, to make vaccines not mandatory. Yeah, that's about time. But the other point is still file and own your child. Don't rely on these men and women to do what you think they're going to do. Don't trust them at all. Don't trust them. They're not for you. They're for their job. They know if they don't create a business, corporation, or other havoc in the community, they're out of a job. These men and women know this for a real fact. So you have to comprehend the truth on these matters of who is benefiting who is working for who who is going to get the income from this? Like your local jails, like your local police departments, or your local counselors. Remember, everybody goes, "Oh, you need a counselor," or if you drink more than 3 or 4 drinks, you're an alcoholic, you know. And everybody goes through these alcoholic phases. Well, if you're not responsible for your actions, quit whining. It's that simple. You're liable. You're responsible for thy actions. You can't blame somebody else for your actions. And that's the whole point in life. People always want to blame somebody else for what they did. They don't want responsibility. Well, if you don't want responsibility, we comprehend that point. But don't sit there and whine to everybody else that it's their fault, your fault, or anybody else's fault when you don't want to take your liability and responsibility. That's like this Kim Davis going, "Well, I don't have to register them even though statute codes and administrative rules says that's my job and that's what I have to do." He doesn't care. My religion is more powerful than the statute codes and administrative rules. And it's like if Kim had any intelligence at all, which that woman apparently doesn't, and I'll tell her that to her own face. But even in a phone call, if she ever has the courage to call me, I've left messages on her Facebook stuff. You know, I'll get a hold of me. I'm going to tear her up in a lot of regards. But it's like, you work for the public, number one. You're not entitled to an opinion, number two. You have a contract with we the people, number three. The minute you cash that paycheck, I don't care what administrative rule says in your position. The minute you cash that paycheck under Title 5, 331 through 3333, you're obligated by the Constitution. That's Constitution of the 48 states. Not the 1871 Vatican Constitution of your religion's belief. And you can type in 1871 Christian Vatican Constitution will come up. That's elected and public employees Constitution that they have after the Civil War. Remember the Civil War? We fought the Southerners. The Southerners were the ones that all wanted taxation, all wanted religion. And we fought them. Yeah, it came out to be, we won the war, but technically it was a truce when it really comes down to it. And then that's where Lincoln forgave everybody of their sins and all that stuff. But we ended up with administrative rules that said that here's the way we have to go by this. I talked to lots of men and women from the South, and they're going, well, you know, we were going in this direction. I said, yeah, but you guys wanted taxation. And they're going, well, that's beside the point. And I'm going, no, that's what the North said. We weren't going to be taxed. We were not going to be taxed. That was the whole point. We didn't want your government. We didn't want your beliefs. I'm Native. I don't want to believe in foreign government, foreign religion. No offense to those people who do. And I mean, that's your First Amendment right. And I have First Amendment rights, too, to believe in my religion, the Great Spirit, Mother Earth, and the Creator. And that's what we're supposed to have, honor and respect for one another. And we're not supposed to be arguing about this stuff. We're supposed to be sitting here going, okay, you have your rights, I have my rights. And everybody goes on with their life. It's not an argument. That is the one point that people like to argue because it's like they don't have nothing else in life to do. Oh, that's right. Without arguing and sitting in front of a TV instead of planting food, taking care of your landscaping. You know, I'm talking food landscaping, not where we're planting lawns and all this stuff, having competitions in the community of seeing whose yard looks prettier and without food. I mean, we're already in a food crisis, folks, when it comes down to it. People don't realize it. I preach all the time, 60% of the food in your grocery store is not food. Not food at all. Plastic, cardboard. How many people have eaten a pizza? Store-bought pizza. It tastes exactly like cardboard. I think we all have at one point. It sure makes you wonder if it was cardboard or flour or mixture. That is the one thing that people got to comprehend, that fact. Is it real or Memorex? Now, that's one thing I do remember, enjoy those commercials of Memorex way back when. Because they did have a few good ones back then. But like this Kim Davis is out there going, I'm a Christian now. Well, did she ever make amends to the men that she was married 3 or 4 times beforehand? Did she actually make amends? Because Christians are supposed to make amends, they claim. But that's what they claim. I always loved Bible thumpers, no offense to some of those other ones. But I'm talking Bible thumpers who don't comprehend what the Bible means, what the Bible says, and don't get it what it means, the whole circumstances of the Bible. Most people don't even comprehend what the Bible is when it comes down to it. Me, I have my opinion. I have others that are giving me different knowledge, different points of view, or looking at it differently than I normally do. I don't have a problem stepping out of the movie and watching a production. Maybe I can learn something. Maybe I can see something that I didn't get. Maybe I can put something that I know together with what they're saying, and we come up with interesting circumstances out of it. But this is the point of life, folks. We're living real life. This is not just hand-me-down clothes. Most of us lived on hand-me-down clothes. And that's the one thing that the Democrats still today, everybody are going after your arm rights. Oh, you're not supposed to have a gun. Don't use the word weapon, gun, or anything like that. Because when you use their words, weapon, it's like I've been in the hospital and I have my arms on me. And they'll go, oh, you know, you got a knife or this on you. And I said, no, that's an arm. Oh, no, this is the way it is. And I said, no, it's not. I said, no, I'm not going along with your words. I don't believe in your way you think. And, you know, and I'm still there. I don't have an issue in the hospital. So it is knowing the wording, how to diffuse the situation and make another man or woman or even a child not be afraid of you. When people act tough, I always get a kick out of that when everybody wants to act tough. What does that do for anybody when you act tough? You might think you're bigger, badder, and something like that when you're acting tough, but when the truth comes down to it, you act tough, sometimes it really makes you look like a fool, an idiot. And that's where people have got to comprehend that fact. You know, it's like, that's one thing that I have fun with some of the conversations I have with gay and lesbians. You know, because they get what I'm saying. A lot of them are starting to pick up on what I'm saying now. It's like, write a contract. Stay out of the system. We don't want you in that system, number one. And I don't want you in their system, number two. Because if you want to be in their system, then you have no rights. Doesn't matter if you're 5, 6, 10 generations, 20 generations. You give up your rights, you have no rights. It's that simple. Either you have rights or you have privileges. Now, I have instruments where the state of Oregon has passed that were it's a privilege, and that is the one point is knowing what a privilege is. So when you go into DMV and you sign for a driver's license, listen to my words, sign. So you're signing to go along with the state corporation administrative rules and giving up your rights to travel lawfully. You're giving up your rights and making your rights into a privilege. And that's the one thing that most people do not comprehend, this reality fact. I gotta crash my computer. It's playing too many games on me. Don't want to get into the flag issue, seeing I brought that up. I want to make sure people comprehend the deal on the flag when you go in these courts. Because it's very important when you go in a course like with this Kim Davis, you know, she's a clerk. When you go in, you see these gold fringe flags, and that's the one thing, Executive Order 10834. 10834. Any courtroom who flies a British flag, that's the gold fringe American flag in their corporation. Remember, the United States government, Inc., is the British government, not American. See, they have all these words to confuse you, totally confuse us. And we think that this is our country. We think that this is the way it is. And I try to explain this to natives. And most of these tribes, you know, they're just off. And then what really disturbs me with native people, we actually have treaties that says we don't need a hunting and fishing license. That includes all natives, not just native Indians. It depends on the way, if you actually word read the wording in the structure, or if you actually read the words in the treaty, because remember, all natives, most of us are what they call half or quarter breeds or whatever. You know, we all got, some of us, a lot of us have native bloodline through our system going back, you know, a few hundred years. And that's the other thing. And when you give a DNA test to a corporation, remember, if you give a DNA test to a corporation, you're giving them ownership unless you specifically write that in that contract. That includes it even for your children. If you don't specifically write that you own that DNA, that you're the holder of that DNA, you're the administrator of that DNA, they own it. And then you wonder, and people go, well, they don't do cloning. They've been successfully doing cloning since 1890 and 1910, United States as well as Germany. Successful cloning is a reality. It is true. And people don't think that that's reality. We've been doing a lot of things in this country. Dolly the sheep in 1997, that was not the first time a sheep was cloned. First time successful cloning of a sheep was 1899, because they wanted to bring that into farming. So it's like, you know, I mean, I sit here and I do a lot of research, reading. I spend a lot of time in different elected and public employee structure. I've sat there and read their instruments and read the Oregon Coast and California Coast maintenance plans for the coast. I've read the structures of what the cities are supposed to be complying with under coast administration rules. And that's what it comes down to, is sitting there. I mean, for the last 40 years, I sit down and I read this stuff. I take a note to this stuff. I pay attention to this stuff because I know it directly affects my life. And it affects your life too. And unless you sat there and do this stuff to do it protecting yourself, you don't have a right. And so this is the one major point that we need to start protecting the bloodline. And that's legal citizens as well, folks. Legal and immigration, as well as our lawful bloodline. And if you don't know your bloodline, you need to sit down with your ancestries and your parents and family and do some research. That is your responsibility to do the research, to know your bloodline, to know where your family came from. So, and also too on United States for America, elected and public employees oversights, New Oregon Trackers, Civil War 1866 Lawful Bloodline, and Recall Cape Brown on Facebook. I do have the flag structure on that. 10834 is on there. So take a look at it. And it's like, to go through this, I'm waiting for my computer. Now I get it up, and now it's starting to freeze again. Interesting. So your flag, this is the one thing. Your martial law flag. Oh, come on, computer. And when it does its own thing. Your martial law flag. Ancient custom sanctions that uses the gold fringe around the flag. Standards. But seems not to be good reason to present, for it is used on other flags as well. And that's, when it has the gold fringe flag, that is for military use in parades. I want to get into the deal of, I should have the deal here where it gets into, okay. When it has on the flag, the pole, I kind of had the whole thing here, but apparently some of that went. This is all about the military flag I have here. But that's like, it has the gold acorn on top. That's supposed to be the military flag, or the ball. That's what they call the acorn. Is the ball flag. When it has a spear, that is under Roman law, Vatican Roman law. Trying to find the other point here. I got to find my other one, because apparently I'm babbling right now, and I shouldn't be babbling. I should have this stuff down, but this is all on the military flag I got up. But like I said, under Executive Order 10834, dated August 21st, 1959. And that walks you through the flags. And the Union Jack flag that they fought in the Southern War, please do the research on it. You'll find out is the sister British flag. And they have, to my knowledge, that I did the research and tried to go back to get it saved, but I should have saved it at the time, which I didn't do. It actually has the original flag they flew on the battlefield on the United States in downtown London in their museum. The original flag that they fought here on this soil. On this soil. And that's the one thing that when the flag, you want to always, like I said, go in with a peace flag. Bring the peace flag in. Then that way, you know, you're going under peace. They know what you're going under of that point of regulation at that point. Their regulation. And speak when you go to court. By your papers. Try not to speak when he asks you your name. Page so-and-so. That's a given name. And that's what I always say. You know, when I deal with the hospital and stuff, they ask me, what's your birth date? I said, I'm not born. You don't own me. I own me. And I mean, most of the doctors and nurses now, when they talk to them, they don't ask me my birth date. They just say, what's the number? You know, they don't get into a conflict with me because I've already proven the fact, and I'm already beyond the fact, and I've proven it when you go in to a hospital or medical procedure, ask them for the original paperwork. You want the original paperwork. You don't want to leave them with the original paperwork. That is the one thing that people have got to comprehend. You don't leave these men and women with the original paperwork. You give them the original paperwork, you lose. Because they could author the original paperwork, they give you a copy, you walk out with a copy, you don't even know what it means. If they alterate it. And that's the one thing too, is like with the Hammonds and Bundys. If they don't use this terminology in their wording. 18 U.S.C. Section 3771, Office of Victim Crime. They're the injured party. The injured man and woman. Amen. If you don't use the terminology correctly. That's how they throw these court cases out. It's that simple. I mean, I'm dealing with something similar right now that is very disturbing to me because I'm dealing with the Oregon State Insurance Board called Risk Management. And they don't want to, you know, they're trying to string me along and drag on the case further and further as they can go. So that way they could try to get me out of what they call their domestic jurisdiction, their administrative rule jurisdiction. And I don't want to be in their domestic administrative rules jurisdiction. I'm going in and stating that I am lawful, here's my rights, and they know it, and they don't want to respond to it because then they know that they are liable. And these men and women know this stuff. They are actually educated and trained in this stuff. And you have to really comprehend that they really are educated in this stuff and trained in this stuff to know this stuff. These people, you'll go in and they'll play stupid with you. They have to play stupid with you. And if you go along with that, they win. They know it. That's the whole point. They've got the whole circumstances of the winning in their hands, in their power. And so, you know, when you go to court, and we've got this up there too, but it's knowing Title 8 U.S.C. 1481. The oath of office taken by a citizenship is relinquished. So when an elected and public employee takes an oath, their citizenship or their rights are relinquished. So that makes them public officers of a foreign state. including political subdivisions. So that means elected and public employees. That means the dog license scooper or whatever, and I don't register my dogs. That's a privilege. Once you register your animals, you give the rights over the county. That's what gives them rights to come on your land when somebody makes a false police report or even whatever police report. So when you do that, you're giving them rights to come on your land, to take your assets from you, your property from you. And when you go through this, the other point is I suggest if you've been assaulted, always put in 18 U.S.C. Code 2381. Definition of treason. That's owing allegiance to the United States, levy war against them, and adhere to their enemies, giving them aid. That's even a paycheck as aid. So it's comprehending how the system is twisted around, comprehending how the structure is defined. It's like sovereign rulings, a natural right is a man may do anything, including may suggest, if it ain't but evil in itself, in no way impairs the rights of another. That is in Norman 9C 502, 1858. So that means if you don't harm somebody else or do damage to somebody else, you're not liable. If you do property damage, make an agreement immediately. Take responsibility. Don't let it get to court, because you get to court, that judge is going to screw you for entertainment purposes. Remember, these guys do this for a living. They get a big paycheck because every time that they get a bonus, every time that they get a section in that payment, they get a cut of that pie. They truly get a cut of that pie. It is a real fact. It's not imagination. They do it for the money. Like the Bible says, the root of all evil is money. And I suggest people definitely look up the Sixth Amendment and read it, what it says, dealing with jury trials and trials. Reading what it says with the lawful administrative rules, so you know it's lawful and legal. We do have this on new.org and trackers that you can click on and read yourself, and that deals with title and nobility. Mayor, city council, and attorney. And attorneys can't even be in office, like terrorist Kate Brown. She's not even supposed to be in office because she isn't a lawyer, an attorney. Still decide today she's a lawyer. Registered today, still a lawyer. Conflict of interest and terrorist activity, and I did file on Kate Brown. But with the filing on Kate Brown, it takes 2 or more witnesses. I've tried to get this to the Bundys and the Hammonds and try to say, hey, you guys want to do something? Let's do something. But with the Hammonds and Bundys, it's just amazing. These people apparently are all about themselves, and I'm stating that right now. Because if they really want to do something with Kate Brown and this stuff, they file that thing because it's a lawful instrument that I filed on Kate Brown. All they have to do is notarize it, autograph it, and turn it in to the Secretary of State and the State Attorney General, as well as the Federal Department of Justice. And it's a guarantee by their own administrative rules. That's where it just stuns me that people don't comprehend what administrative rules compared to the Constitution are. But so many people, no offense to those people, want to go by their religion, but the Bible ensures your rights. Where does the Bible give you rights? The men and women of this country wrote the Constitution to protect our rights. They wrote it so we wouldn't go through being terrorized and harassed and all this stuff. They did it deliberately to protect your and my rights, lawful and legal. So long as legal citizens are paying all their taxes, administrative fees, registration costs, and all that, they can't be held liable. So long as that there is no injured man or woman. You're paying these elected and public employees to protect your livelihood in this country. The way it really works, folks. This is not a mystery novel. Once you start comprehending how simple our structures are in this territory and this country, it's like I posted up the structure dealing with BLM. I could prove BLM had no rights over there at the mall. Yeah, I get tongue twisted on that. The Mahler Refuge had no rights over there. That was given to the Oregon State residents in 2006. Not only that, I have the videotape that I put up from Congress, the BLM lawyers saying they don't even have rights to be there. There's no administrative rule that gives them rights. That was done in 2013 by their own attorneys. 2003 on the congressional floor. And this is the one thing that people don't comprehend when you do these researches and you start stepping out of the movie and you start putting this stuff together and you start realizing what it is. It's like the bar is the British accreditation to the registration of the King and Queen of England. I've argued with attorneys say, I never registered for the bar. And I said, so, all right, so how come you're not taking the lawsuit on when you won that case of that guy and go sue the judge and sue the corporation? He goes, what are you, crazy? No, I'm not crazy. I just want to know why you're not doing your job, because under oath, you took a constitutional oath supposedly to be an attorney. That gives you a surname privilege that you're not supposed to have a no title and nobility under Section 1, Article 1, Section 9. So how come you're not protecting these men and women? And this is the point that people do not comprehend. It's like 1795. The Supreme Court absolutely stated there is to be no income tax or taxes. That's what gets to me. These things have already been decided on previously, and if you try to find, I mean, there's one guy who's got 100,000, another one's got another structure of 500,000 offering people to prove the law to pay taxes. And if you actually read the tax code, it's administrative rules to pay taxes. It's administrative rules, not law. They cannot put a tax on you. Your labor is your labor. Your resources are your resources, not theirs. And one of the good things is Valenti's Law Dictionary, 3rd edition. Read what the dollar means in it. And they can't tax you on that. And then I don't have that one memorized or on my face right in front of me. But I actually have the laws, too, that says if you're paying taxes and all this stuff with the Treasury notes, it's a federal crime because you can't pay debt with crime. It's actually a federal crime to pay debt with debt. That's by their own laws. They wrote it. We're quoting it. Their laws state that if you pay a debt with a federal crime, you're liable. And we'll get more into that down the road here, but I got to make sure I got certain things to comprehended before I start going in that direction. The one thing I have put out, and I'm getting out, and I'm trying to get a response back. We'll see. I've got response from other things I sent to the House and Senate. But I put in for a bill for 25% of the lottery funds to come back to Oregon State residents. Oh, damn, I can't believe I said that bad word. Lawful bloodline Americans, if you're a resident, that means you're not lawful. That means you give your rights over the state. If you're an inhabitant, you give your rights over the state. You're not lawful. It's the word twisting that they use these words, and they get us going, and we think that we're doing stuff right on some things of the words we're using until we actually sit down and do the research and you figure out what the lawyers and the twisting of the words mean. They do these twistings of the words so that way, this is how the legal system, remember, legal system is the Vatican British government, called the United States Incorporation, not of we the people of the 48 states. But they use these words twisting so that way they know that, all right, people are learning this as they're going along, so they're hoping that you make the flaw in that instrument that you write. That's how they can go off that one word or the one paragraph. Basically, you admit that you are, and that's how they come in and deny your claim or go after you. That's the saddest part. And we are actually physically living that today. That's what just gets to me about this structure of how they do this stuff to us and to keep us in their structure of system. It's done deliberately, folks. This is not an accident. And by the way, if you got a manufacturer state or a home in Oregon, please, I encourage you to read the manufacturer law. Chapter 446 to 446, even a 2011 edition. So long as your manufacturer property is, well, they consider if it's not stable, if it's on jacks, you don't have to register it. But also, too, it even says you don't have to register your title with the state or the county. And if you register your title and your manufacturer home to the county, you give your rights over to the county, to that property. Your manufactured home is your property, not the state, the county, state, or city. But when you register that, you give them authority to take your land. That's how they get away with this stuff. It's all based on wording. And once we start putting the wordings together and you start comprehending how to write your instruments, and if you go look at Title 18 U.S.C. Code 8, Obligations and Other Securities of the United States. Term obligation and other securities of the United States includes all bonds, certificates, negotiating bonds, national bank currency, Federal Reserve notes, Federal Reserve bank notes, coupons, United States notes, Treasury notes, gold certificates and silver certificates, fraction notes, certificates of deposit, and bills and checks. So Title 18, U.S.C. Section 8, please read that. You might learn something on what's lawful, what's legal, and what's real money, what's not real money. And that, I'm just bringing this stuff up to you, folks, so this way it's up to you to do the research, so take the time to do this stuff, look at this stuff, because if you want to own your land, or if you want to own your covered wagon, or if you want to own your child until your child's 18, now you can know how to do this stuff. These are the instruments that you need to quote in your instruments, these administrative rules. You know, 31 U.S.C. Code 3124, exemption from taxes. That means you can be exempt from taxes completely. You know, so this is the one thing that you need to read these things. You need to comprehend these words. I can give you the information. I'll bring these things. I've had many conversations with people going through this. But until you comprehend it, I can't sit there and hold your hand and try to get it through your head when you're not comprehending it. And you can type it in on the YouTube videos and put videos on and go to sleep to the videos. Some people could actually go to sleep to videos and they get it when they're in their sleep, their dream state. And look at the banking structure. I can't remember the actual number of the United States Banking Administrative Rules, but type in United States Banking Administrative Rules and read that. I'll even walk you through your finances and money of what you can and cannot do. That's like this clerk, you know, Miss Davis. I'm a Christian, but I've been married 4 times, and now I'm asking for forgiveness because that's, you know, I mean, I've been through that. I mean, I look back on the things that I went through in relationships, and I really do look back on a few things, and I look back where I was at then, and I look at where I was at now, and sometimes I look back going, man, God, if I had some of the knowledge I had today, I wouldn't have gone through some of these other things. But that's wish in one hand, and we know what's in the other, so it's, you know, we have to deal with life on this. And then interest on obligations from state income taxation. See, the state has to pay this stuff too, but the only thing in taxation is from interest and dividends that you are taxed. So you have stocks and bonds, so in other words, you're making funny money off of funny money. And that's how the IRS can get you on that one, because you are making funny money off of funny money. And this is how people end up and go into court, and you know, they end up in jail, and they wonder why, and they go after this guy or that guy. They filed his paperwork, Yes, you could follow paperwork, do that, but also too realistically read it, comprehend it. Don't just take somebody's paperwork and just sign it up as yours and just turn it in and you don't even know what it says. Because by doing that, you're putting yourself in a liability issue. And that's the point. That's the one thing that me and my associates here, we don't want to put anybody in a liability issue. We want to make sure that you comprehend your rights, not privileges. We want to make sure that if you're a privileged personnel in this country, you understand your privileges so that way you know how to defend your privilege so that way you don't get into a conflict. You know, I don't have a problem with legal immigration. I do with illegal. And people will go, and I got all over the internet, and these people on major TVs, and they're whining about the children. Well, the children, you know, they're here under DACA or the DREAM Act. Sorry, there ain't no DREAM Act. When you wake up from a dream, you're gone. It's not our obligation to feed you, take care of your clothes, take care of your children. Doesn't work that way. You're not going to do it when I'm in your home, and you're sure not going to allow me to come in your home and tell you how to live in your home. And then the other point is I will be putting up a major 30-page affidavit on the rights to travel with the history of vehicle registration, with the structure of lawful and legal on insurance, the whole structure eventually, because I'm working on that to put that into a bill to the Oregon State House and Senate coming up, because I want to get that in so that way for a traveler's card for lawful bloodline Americans. So we have these rights, but it's inserting our rights, not arguing our rights, inserting our rights. It's like knowing the separation of lawful and legal on public land. So we have to know our rights on public land. Public land belongs to we the people. And if we the people don't know our public land rights, how are we supposed to know how to deal with our responsibilities? See, these are one thing that people's got to start paying attention to this circumstances realistically. You know, driving is like the state of Oregon has recreational vehicle on their vehicles. Literally. That is 446.003.33. Recreational vehicle, so you don't need to register your car. The other point is know what inter-insurance exchange means. You know, and it's like, yeah, this is homework that you need to read. These are homework that you need to comprehend instead of knowing what video game or what's on Walt Disney TV. See, this is the one thing that people don't realize, and I will be putting another one up here pretty soon. We're working on with another couple groups that we're going to be putting up a structure dealing with the smart meters they put on homes. We know that the smart meters are destroying people's brains. We know the smart meters are bugging your home, literally. And they could tell everybody in your home, your activities in your home, they could actually tell that by who's in your home. And so these are things that you need to know. Recreational vehicle safety and construction standards. You can type that in on the internet for the state of Oregon. See, a recreational vehicle is, they have it twisted with a conflict of interest, what I'm trying to get figured out here really soon. Because your boat and your car is called a recreational vehicle. They have it listed as a recreational vehicle, so you don't need insurance and you don't need liability. Insurance and liability, and when they went after people's driver's license, so if you didn't have a driver's license in the state of Oregon, was in 1999, when a congressman and a senator in the same year, both of them lost their child in a drunk driving accident. So that's when they started going after it, and what pissed me off about all that, the ones that committed the actual death on those men and women were illegal immigrants. Did they go after the immigrants? No, because they need the immigrants for funding. income is more important in your family lives, so that way they make their $100,000 or $200,000 a year up to capital. Their income is more important in your family. As soon as you accept that reality, you might comprehend a few more things in life. But you have to realize that your life is nothing to these men and women. They do not care about your life. And as soon as you start accepting that, that's when we're going to start getting a lot further in this country. You know, and it's like 5, Section 2635, basic obligation of public service. Public service is a public of trust. Each employee has a responsibility to the United States government. Wait a minute, did you catch that? Public service is a public trust. Each employee has a responsibility to the United States government and its citizens in place of loyalty to the Constitution. So let me get that one read here. I want you to read this up. 5 CFR, Section 2635, basic obligation of public service. Public service is a public trust. Each employee has a responsibility to the United States government. Well, technically, by the Constitution, we the people are the government. And its citizens to place loyalty to the Constitution. Now, I've argued with public employees on this statement with them. And they have argued with me and going, well, the Constitution they go by is the 1871 British Administration Constitution. I got to change my phone here for a minute because the dog, I got to open the door. But I've argued with them, and I've talked to many different people over time about the separation of lawful and legal. What is the legal Constitution? What is the lawful Constitution? Well, we go by the legal Constitution. And, you know, you'll get some that will be honorable and tell you the truth. They're not all going to be telling you, oh, well, that's just the way it is. There are some honorable elected and public service members. I have dealt with many of public servants members who are honorable, who I don't have an issue with, no argument with, because they're honorable. They told me the truth. I have to respect those men and women. I have to respect them totally because they were honorable. You know, so that's the one thing that these are things that we have to do with each other through the knowledge and education, passing education around. Because knowing what the words mean, knowing what these administrative rules are. Remember, these are administrative rules. They're administrative rules, what I'm bringing to your attention, too. In laws and ethic, principle above the private gain. To ensure every citizen can complete in confidence in integrity of the federal government, each employee shall respect and adhere to the principles of the ethic conduct set forth in this section, as well as implement standards containing in this part and supplement agency regulations. So they have this stuff in it. So when you're writing your instruments, put this stuff in your instruments. Walk them through their own administrative rules. Because when you walk them through their own administrative rules, what are they going to do? Try to say it doesn't exist? Well, does this exist? Isn't this in your book? See, when you're doing lawful and legal, you want to make sure that they know that you know that you know that they know that you know what you're reading. You know, and this is the other point, and this is federal law too. The other point is employees shall not use public office for private gain. Like Kate Brown, our governor. How many of your public employees that you know that use their office for private gain? And even when they do, what do they call that, elections and all that stuff, and they get all the donations, that's for private gain. Remember, they didn't start doing that until the last 25 years. Prior to that, they didn't do that, and the newspapers and radio TV shows used to run their stuff on the media without charge. the newspapers and media used to have so much time a year that they were guaranteed by the IRS Code Administrative Rules that they could write off and charge the timing off for running their ads and stuff. Well, then it got to the point where they said they weren't making enough to run the advertising and structure and the codes, and so then the Democrats started privatizing it in the mid-1970s. So that started with Watergate when it really started happening. And that was after 1973 when the hospitals were allowed to privatize and charge income. Hospitals didn't technically start doing that until 1985, but they passed it in 73. Prior to that, a hospital couldn't make an income because prior to that, hospitals were tied into the property tax of your property. And this is where most people don't comprehend that fact. But they were tied into your property tax. So everybody was covered. And then they started covering illegals. And that was the one point that, why are we paying all these illegals in our country for their medical services, for their handouts, their aid? I mean, we got more foreign people, even foreigners outside of our country, outside of our own country, that we ship food to and provide homeless shelter and stuff like this to other people in other countries at yours and our expense. And that's the one thing that people don't get it. They do this at our expense because they know that we're not, all of us are not that smart because we give it away. And they know that. And that's what they want us to do, is give away our rights. And they're adamant about doing that because they make income off of giving our rights away. Because it's all based on income. And then when you go to jail, they're doing this in jail. So that way, when you go to jail, they make their income. So you understand the deal of national and citizens United States at birth. 8 USC code 1401.
Ed?
Yeah.
Comprehend.
Comprehend. Thank you. Slap me harder next time. I was going to get into that one, but thank you. But I was going to chew myself out in a sense because I was going to bring that in. But yes, comprehend. United States citizens were declared enemy of the United States, we the people, by FDR, Executive Order 24, ratified by Congress. Ratified, remember, March 9th, 1933. That's the date of the Bankruptcy Act. That's the date that the House Resolution 192 came in place to write off or autograph your debt. FDR changed the meaning of Trading with the Enemy Act December 6, 1917 by changing the word without to citizens within. So that means if you're a citizen within the United States, you're an enemy. See, without meant the lawful constitution. Within means now any citizen in the United States. So when you're claiming that you are a citizen, you're claiming you're an enemy to we the people. To cover the 1933 debt and future debts of the British corporation, determining that, remember, the British government went bankrupt to we the people, determining to establish the value of future labor of each incorporation individual in its jurisdiction to be $630,000 a bond. On your birth certificate, each certificate, birth or life certificate, are bundled together in sets that place all securities in the open market. That's Wall Street. These certificates are then purchased by the Federal Reserve and foreign bankers. The purchaser are holding title to you by your birth certificate. So in other words, they're saying that you're my slave. You do what I tell you to do. And that's how they're getting away with this stuff with your birth certificate on you. And that's the point, that you've got to figure this stuff out. And when you're writing your instruments, I put this stuff in my instruments all the time. I want them to know that I know that they know that I know about the Bankruptcy Act and the true meaning of it. certificate of purchase of the Federal Reserve. I already just said that. But this goes in the jurisdiction of bond servant. So it took you from being a lawful American and put you as a servant to the corporation. Immigration and elected and public employees, registered church members, and voters, and all immigrations are already servants. But they're putting you as a servant because you don't know to claim to own you or your child. And H.R. 192 was discussed where can we discharge our debt by 192? Yes, that's the instrument that they put in place for lawful Americans to write off their debt. And I am working with the Utility Commission and a few other things like that right now. I do have things that are certified, registered in their books. I just got to get back to them, so we're working on trying to get this in place. Because if we can get this in place, the lawful Americans, we do have an out. That's why I'm putting that 25% of lottery funds in, trying to get that, because if we could get that passed, and if you see that floating around the internet, please autograph it, send it into your House and Senate members, tell them you want this to go through, because that is administrative rules, and if we get the administrative rules, then that way, once that's passed, we actually prove the separation of lawful and legal. I do have that on New Oregon Trackers. I do have that information on Civil Rights 1866 Lawful Bloodline Americans. I do have it on Recall Cape Brown, and I do have it on the United States America Republic, Elected and Public Servants Oversights. And that is the Constitution contract that I have up that Judge Scalia was given before he was murdered. You don't wake up, you don't kill yourself with a pillow over your face. Sorry, I don't buy it. Everybody else knows it too. Most people do know the truth. Don't forget to look at Marbury versus Madison, 5 U.S. 137, 1803, year 1803, dealing with your 10th Amendment rights, not privileges. And see, the thing is that when you are elected and public servant, immigrant, I apologize for that one, an immigrant, and you're paying for these rights, you're paying for these administrative rules to help protect you as well. But if you're not paying this structure, you don't have rights. You don't even have privileges. You're just a domestic terrorist, 100%. And I love people who want to argue about the 14th Amendment. All right, the fair right of trial guaranteed the state. Criminal defense by due process clause of the 14th Amendment imposes state, we're talking capital S states, not little s state corporation, concerns duty consent with their sovereignty obligation and to assure that justice shall be done in all criminal proceedings, United States versus August, 427 U.S. 97111.96 SCT 239249L ED 2D 342. That's 1976. So that already went through the Supreme Court on the 14th Amendment that says the 14th Amendment separates lawful and legal and gives people rights, lawful American rights. And then it was redone too in 1963. Prior to that, 76, we held the state suppression evidence favorable and accused that material to the guilt, or to punish the state violations, the defender's rights of due process. So that means we're not a democracy. In other words, you can't just go in front of a judge and the judge says, I'm putting you in jail for 6 months. You have to go in front of a grand jury. And the other point, this is the other point that I want to bring to your attention. Cone versus Bell. Whereas the state, according to law, has to use gold as payments of debt. Now, I want you to clarify this. Cone versus Bell, 556 U.S. 449 451 U.S. 2009. Whereas the states, according to law, has to use gold as payment to debt. So that's why I'm bringing this stuff to your attention, because once you start comprehending our system of how it works compared to what we fantasize it working or what we're led to believe it's working, then we know how it's working. So once you start putting these things together and start walking this through your administrative rules that you're writing for yourself, because you're writing your own administrative rules when it comes down to it, you're setting yourself up in these structures for yourself. So you're writing your administrative rules for your house, for your children, your laws, for your structure on your land. You have a right to do that, but you want to make sure that when you do it, at least try to get it certified through the state, especially get it notarized. A lot of people say, well, you don't want it notarized and it takes 3 people. Yeah, you can get 3 signatures too on it, 3 autographs. Absolutely. But I do recommend that people get it notarized so that way it's for their system, so it alleviates a conflict of interest, if that makes sense. And like I said, in Oregon State Law, Chapter 803, Vehicle and Title Registration, Section 035, says you don't need registration for your vehicle. So these are very important things that we're bringing out to you, folks, because we ask you to read this stuff as long as what I'm reading, so that way there's no conflict of interest. We put this up on our website. We're getting it out there for educational purposes, because it's up to you to protect your bloodline. Because if you don't protect your bloodline, nobody else is going to do it. And if you're in Oregon Territory, I do recommend you read ORS 180.220, Powers and Duties of Elected and Public Officials. That's their administrative rules of what they have to go by, what they are to do. Not what you are to do, what they are to do. See, this is the thing. No state officer, board commissioner of the head of any department, instruction of the state shall employ or represent any other counsel or attorney at law. Oh, my God, Kate Brown, you can't do it even by Oregon State administrative rules. See, this is the thing. When you read this stuff and you start putting these pieces together, these puzzles, and you start going, holy mackerel, she can't do this, and she's doing this. So when I put these instruments in and I file this stuff with the Department of Justice and stuff, they get upset because they know I'm right. And this is the point that it gets to it. And if you guys need to autograph and support this stuff because you want it, you're going to have to get it, because otherwise you're going to have to protect yourself. No separation of citizen of a territory or any other citizen, its inhabitants and residents have, which Congress can confer. This is dealing with nationals and citizens of the United States and corporation. I mean, and these are laws I'm reading to you that says this structure in it that walks you through the actual laws. And the other one to go look at, too, is a good book, written in 1889 called The 45 Years of Registration Statistics. 1889 that was written. This is before they put the 1940 administrative rules intact, where they started charging registration, administrative fees, all this other stuff that we're living with today. Anyhow, boy, I've been going on almost 2 hours. I think we should open up and see if anybody wants to bring out a thought, or I'll give somebody else the floor for a bit if somebody wants to speak.
All participants are unmuted.
Say, Ed?
Yeah, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Yeah, earlier you said that to take a peacetime flag when you walk in court. Does that include if you're the plaintiff of that's filing?
Absolutely. You're walking in peace.
Okay, and also you said also to demand, not request, demand the to see the judge's license and the license of the prosecutor or any attorney.
Yeah, you want to put that in writing and have it served on the clerk for them to prove it. You want to make sure it's in writing.
Okay, and then what? If they are unable to do that, then what happens in the court then?
Well, then I have that other form that I think I sent you where you file on the clerk for not doing her job providing the evidence. If the clerk don't provide the evidence that a man or woman requests legally or lawfully, they are liable, and it's mandatory up to 1 year in federal prison.
Okay, but what happens to the judge and the attorney? They go to prison
When you
too?
serve that on the clerk, do you realize that you'll see people start changing their attitudes really quick. If that makes sense, you'll see once you file. It depends on the way you write. You put together the instrument. If you do it politely, you'll get things happening. They'll squirm and yell and scream, and I even have the structure where an oath of office coming under 22 CRF is Foreign Relations, Section 92-12 through 9230. So that means their oath of office that they get a paycheck. That's federal law, and if they don't do their job, that includes the clerk. That they go. And also too, when you do that, don't forget to ask them to prove this. See if they're filed under the 1938 Foreign Agent Registration Act.
Wouldn't I file that also along with the my instruments?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I primarily put that in all my instruments, just for the sake of argument. Doesn't matter if I put it in the one before to the same one. I want to make sure it's in there, because then that way, if it's in there more than once, he can't say I didn't ever ask it. He can't say he overlooked it. See, I want to cut him off at the pass. I don't want to give him an out.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ed. I yield.
No problem. I appreciate that. A good question. Anybody else got a thought to throw in? Okay. Well, and then the other point I want to bring to your attention before we wrap up the show tonight, or the education part here, besides each state law must conform in the first place to the Constitution. That is of we the people, the 1978 ratified Constitution, under the structure going simply under that, saying that each state, mandatory, each state in place the Constitution of the United States, and then to the subordinate Constitution of the particular state. So what that means is that the original Constitution of that state, this was done in 1840, before really the administrative courts really started taking in place, before they even had a bar and all this other stuff. So this goes back to Houston versus Moore, 18 U.S.C., 1840. You can type that in and pull this up for your records, and if you don't, I can always send it to whoever. But nothing can destroy a government more quickly than its failure to observe its own laws, or worse, the discarded of a charter in its own existence. So they're saying on this one is that we all know they have charters. The Constitution is considered a charter as well. So it's knowing these things when you're putting your instrument together, of how you're putting it together. And like I said, statutes is not law. And that even goes back to Flannery versus First National Bank of Servantport. And doesn't have a year on that one. And codes are not law. And that, I have all this stuff that we have up on the website that you could pull up anytime, look at it, shop through the website. We got up there, new.org trackers. So you can look at these things. You could use this information in your instruments. But just remember, we're not attorneys. We're not lawyers. We're nobody primarily. We are just educators that are passing on what we're learning and educating ourselves to you. It's like, what branch of government does a cop belong to? Legislative branch, executive branch, or judicial branch? Cop is not part of any of the three branches. So this is the point that people got to figure these things out, that police departments have no legal authority or lawful authority. They're private contractors, debt collectors for the IRS or the corporation of the city, county, and state. That's all they are. And that's what it is. You know, a cop is not a civil officer whatsoever with any jurisdiction. He's just a hired hitman, is basically what he is. I know, I was in the profession. Rent-a-cops, that's all they are, is rent-a-cops, mall cops. When it really comes down to it, that's all a cop is a mall cop. And detention, they need to have an actual warrant by a jury. And so you want to put that in your instruments that you will not be detained in any circumstances without a warrant from an actual jury. I mean, these are things that, you know, I put into my instruments. I even go back to the 16th century where the term created, or Roman courts were created in the 16th century. Two Latin terms being pro se, meaning for one of his own behalf, or curts, the skin is flesh. So, I mean, this goes back with their own history writing and their own law books. So, I mean, that's where I'm coming from, is that, you know, they wrote this stuff up. They put this together up by their attorneys and lawyers and, you know, their gentlemen or whatever people want to call them. They put this stuff up. So the whole point and the whole purpose of the circumstances is using their words on them. And it's like courts are free. I have the court cases on that. When you want to file and go to court, courts are free. A man and woman don't pay for a court to go to court. A person does. A citizen does. A national does. And that's the one thing that people don't comprehend this. Like I said, I've passed this stuff on to the Bundys, trying to get them to comprehend some of this stuff. So this way they can file and fight their court battle. So that way they are not just going in to a foreign jurisdiction. They know how to do it. I mean, Ammon apparently did a wonderful job defending himself compared to the others. He was the only one, to my knowledge, that didn't have an attorney. Everybody else had attorneys. And he's the only one that didn't have an attorney and tore him up. And also, too, public officers have no rights in relationship to their employers. And you are the employer. So it is knowing your standing as in being the employer of how to do these things. So, but anyhow, we're about the top of the hour. I would like to thank everybody for joining us this evening. And for those who come up later, you've got new.org trackers on the web. And then on our Facebook sites, go to new.org trackers on Facebook. We have the United States for America, elected and public employees structure. United States of America, Republic, elected and public employees oversights. We have the Civil Rights 1866 Lawful Bloodline Americans, as well as Recall Kate Brown. And also, too, I'll be getting in here pretty soon, next couple of weeks or next week, and we haven't figured out what we're going to do next week yet. But I want to start getting into property taxes and taxes on the circumstances of taxes, and we'll be putting up an affidavit to that one so people could comprehend what the deal of taxes, tax law is. For those who get this now, please go on the internet and type in IRS director admits that all taxes are voluntary. That's the IRS director admitting to it. So when people realize that the IRS director even admits that all taxes are voluntary in Congress, at the House and Senate public hearings. And like I said, I've got elected and public employees at the Oregon State House and Senate admitting property taxes are voluntary, and I have that on video that I eventually plan on getting up. But I got a few more projects to do before I can make that totally public. But I got a few other things I have to do first, because I want to make sure I don't put myself in a bind. So, and make it clear so everybody knows this one too, that the federal government, called Washington, D.C., called the British government, came out recently in their structure and stated publicly that the state and lawyers own your children. And you can type in that they came out and said it. It is there. It is, you know, that's what amazes me. These guys are coming out being more vain than they ever been before, and they're bringing this stuff out. And that's what I'm trying to explain to people. You've got to start standing up, owning yourself, filing your ownership for your children, walk your children through the ownership of them, so that way your bloodline is protected. We will be eventually getting paperwork eventually up so that way you can file and own your land. We even have the structure up on our site with vaccinations of all the chemicals in some of the vaccinations, not all of them, but some of them. So this way you get to know. To bring your attention, the Private Drivers Privacy Protection Act. If you never heard of that, that's 41 CFR 302.9.1. That's the Private Vehicle Owner Action. That's federal law when you own your own vehicle. See, they have this stuff already up for us, but it's that we have to be responsible to know what we're doing, be responsible for our actions, and to write our instruments up so it's not a conflict of interest. Just like them, you know, we have the same thing. We got to protect ourselves so we're not in a conflict of interest. So just food for thoughts. Anyhow, I guess we'll call it an evening then, seeing that we would like to thank everybody for joining us, and for those who listen to this video afterwards, please hit the like button on the YouTube channel, because we're trying to get some more likes up there and boost up that one. We are working on a whole bunch of new projects that we're going to have coming up that we'll be putting up, so that way people can comprehend the separation of lawful and legal, because that's the whole point of knowing what's lawful and legal in this country, to know who's lawful and who's an immigrant. Because remember, immigration has privileges. And also, too, before we end tonight, 1971, I'm going to bring this up to you. People compelled to file income tax violates your Fifth Amendment rights. The Supreme Court decided this. And you can type in, people compelled to pay federal income tax violates the Fifth Amendment. It will come up. I have it all over the internet. That's the actual one of the laws. I have more of them, too, where income taxes are voluntary. I have the structure on the laws that say they're voluntary. You know, so it's one of those things that when you put your affidavit together with the IRS, you're not arguing with them, you're not fighting with them. You're just putting it up, and you're sending them information, and you let it be. You will, after time, they'll come back, and you won't hear from them. Or you'll get an apology letter, or a letter that states that your account is zeroed. And that does happen, too. People do get a letter back saying their account's zeroed. So these are just food for thoughts, things to think about, and things to look at how to go in a different direction. And remember, the American Bar Association, you can look that up. It actually says in the American Bar Association, August 21, 1871, that all attorneys and lawyers are British Auxiliary Register agents to the King and Queen of England. And that is the American Bar Association, 1871, the first bar association that was founded in this country. Prior to that, we didn't have attorneys. So it's like stepping out of the movie, watch the production, and like I do strongly say, watch the movie Interstate 60. At least twice I recommend it, and you might be pleasantly surprised about the way you get your knowledge on that one. Anyhow, with that, may the Great Spirit bless you. May the Mother Earth bring you your life around you, your food, and may the Creator bless you and your family.
Well, thank you for listening to Education by Ed. It is Sunday, January 28th, 2018. We will be coming back to you on Saturday and Sunday. Mondays are canceled due to scheduling differences. Other shows wanted to schedule on Monday to block what Ed had to say, so we switched to Saturday. So catch us during the weekends when everybody's pretty much home. Unless you're out there getting drunk, then you just don't care. So thank you again, and you have a good night, and we'll see you next week.